I've been talking to a lot of people these days who are tired and burned out, and I can't help but think that has to do somehow with the expectations that they place on themselves. Mm-hmm. Do you find that true?
Yes, and not surprisingly, a lot of my friends, my family, and including myself, from time to time, we do feel burnt out because of the expectations that are placed. But the question always led me to another question, which is, who is placing these expectations upon ourselves? It is not someone other than ourselves. So if I say I'm going to do such a thing, quite often it's nobody's telling me to do that thing, or nobody's telling me to do it perfectly, but the expectation is coming from within me.
Right, and it may be something that you can put your finger on, and it may be something that you've somehow just imbibed from your life or your experience or your family. Mm-hmm. And these expectations have really been handed to you somehow by the people you look up to, or by the people you hang out with, right, or by your parents or scholars or teachers or whatever. The question really is, are they your views?
Right, and that's a very good point you made, because I feel like that's almost like an inherited expectation that we have just,
a great way to describe it,
taken upon ourselves because of how we were raised up, or how what kind of people we were surrounded with for most part of our lives, because that really puts another lens at how we're looking at expectations.
Exactly, and so much of the spiritual life really boils down to asking yourself, where did this belief come from? Mm. Is it true? Is it mine? Did I borrow it from someone? Am I just using the words I've heard somewhere? Mm. And finding the real depth of that question. What is it I know? What is it I believe? But you're oh so right about expectations. There's an old bromide that says, expectations are future resentments.
Right.
I think that's true to some degree.
Absolutely. And I also think, on one hand, there's expectations, but there's also, on the other hand, expecting to be perfect at everything that we do. Now, I feel that expecting oneself to be perfect is really a lack of self-compassion.
Okay.
And we can get satisfaction from trying to be perfect, but then measuring oneself or judging oneself when we've done something not so perfectly is really a lack of self-compassion upon ourselves.
I think that's right, and there's another component too. By expecting perfection, one abandons the responsibility. Oh, I can't do it perfectly. So I can't do that well. But if one could say, I'll do it to the best of my ability, right, and own it, right, that would be better.
Yeah. Another thing that came to mind is taking an example of a mother who has just given birth to her first child, and she's doing everything for her child, from feeding her, bathing her, putting her to bed, with a lot of love and joy, because this is her first child, it's new, it's excitement. And yet I've seen many times, as the time progresses, the same things that the mother was doing when the child was new, now actually she feels burnt out because of the same thing she was doing. So what changes between that time to this time?
It has to be one's attitude somehow. It has to be expectations.
Right. And I also feel there's a joy that the mother felt when she first had the baby, and the excitement that came with it. So everything that she was doing, she didn't even feel like she was responsible, because she was doing with love, as opposed to when the time progresses.
Yes, as the time progresses, there's more of the I have to do this.
Right.
How interesting, certainly. How attitudes change over time. And your example was a new mother who was filled with the joy of having a new baby, maybe a first child, and all of the joy there is in caring for and feeding and bathing and so forth the new child. But how in time, instead of that being a joy, it becomes a chore, and a stress of some kind. Why do you think that happens?
Well, I think when we move things from doing certain things to find joy in them, towards them becoming a part of a routine. And a routine where we can't put meaning behind it. So one thing that I feel would help such a person is to ask, why am I doing this? And not ask this question when you're agitated, but really ask that question even when any moment that you get during your daytime, saying, okay, I'm doing this for this being who is my child, and why am I doing this? And think about what comes up from your own investigation.
Well, as that attitude molts from joy to obligation, is there a notion of burden or maybe forgiveness that needs to be included in that?
Right.
Because it's normal to be burdened by things, and rather than looking at that burden as a shortcoming, one can forgive oneself for having an attitude of being tired or bored or whatever, but doing the right thing anyway. Yes.
Right. And I think when we take on anything, in this case, for example, caring for your child, we place ourselves on the level of perfection. And in that process, we sometimes forget to be compassionate to ourselves.
Exactly.
And that's what needs to be practiced and reminded again and again. And this is where the burnout happens, when that level of perfection is not reached and the mother is like, oh, I used to be able to do these things for my child, now I cannot. Why is that?
Yes, recently I was part of an exchange where a new mother asked the question, how can I be a good mother? And one of the answers was, by not being a perfect mother.
Right. Not surprisingly, right? Because you can only be helpful to others when you're helpful to yourself first.
Right.
And that starts with compassion and love for your own self first. And then the rest will really take care of itself.
Yes, you start by opening your own eyes to these things. And that joy is still available. You may have lost touch with it or focused elsewhere, but it's still available. All you have to do is get yourself out of the way.
And find the joy.
And find it.